Welcome to War Bios, the podcast that delves into the intricacies of warfare and the human experience on the battlefield. I'm your host, General Biography, and today we're going to explore one of the most pivotal battles of the Vietnam War, the Battle of Hue in 1968. This brutal and complex conflict was a turning point in the war, showcasing the determination and resilience of both the North Vietnamese Army and the Allied forces. The Perfume River, with its serene waters and picturesque banks, flowed gently through the heart of the city, which was home to the Imperial Citadel, a majestic fortress that had once served as the capital of the Huan dynasty. The city's rich history dated back to 1805, when it was founded by Emperor Jia Long, and over the centuries, it had been shaped by various cultures, including the French, who had left an indelible mark on its architecture. The historical context of the Battle of Hue is deeply rooted in the Vietnam War, which had been escalating since the early 1960s. The North Vietnamese Army, supported by the Viet Cong, had been waging a guerrilla war against the government of South Vietnam and its main ally, the United States. In 1967, the North Vietnamese Army began to shift its focus from rural areas to urban centers, with the aim of launching a series of coordinated attacks on major cities during the Tet holiday. As the Tet holiday approached, the city's inhabitants were unaware of the impending danger. The streets were filled with people celebrating the Lunar New Year, and the atmosphere was festive. However, beneath the surface, tensions were simmering. The North Vietnamese Army had been secretly infiltrating the city, using disguises and deception to gather intelligence and prepare for the attack. On January 29, 1968, the eve of the Tet holiday, the NVA launched a series of diversionary attacks on nearby military outposts, drawing the attention of the defenders away from the city. Meanwhile, under the cover of darkness, the NVA's 6th Regiment began to infiltrate the city, using hidden routes and tunnels to evade detection. The regiment was led by Colonel Nguyen Thanh Xuan, a seasoned commander who had been tasked with capturing key objectives in the city, including the Imperial Citadel and the provincial capital building. As we explore the origins of the Battle of Hue, it's essential to understand the strategic importance of the city. Located near the Demilitarized Zone (DMZ), which separated North and South Vietnam, Hue was a critical stronghold for the South Vietnamese government and its allies. The city's capture would not only be a significant propaganda victory for the North Vietnamese Army, but also provide them with a vital foothold in the region. The battle ahead would be fierce and brutal, with both sides suffering heavy losses, but ultimately it would be a turning point in the war, marking a shift in the balance of power and paving the way for the eventual withdrawal of American forces from Vietnam. The initial assault caught the defenders off guard, with the NVA quickly capturing key objectives such as the Imperial Citadel and the provincial capital building. The South Vietnamese forces, led by General Nguyen Ngoc Loen, were initially unable to respond effectively to the surprise attack, allowing the NVA to gain a foothold in the city. However, as the battle raged on, the Allied forces began to regroup and counterattack. The U.S. Marine Corps' 1st Battalion, 1st Marines, led by Lieutenant Colonel Stanley S. Hughes, was tasked with retaking the city. The Marines launched a series of fierce assaults against the NVA positions, using a combination of artillery, air support, and infantry attacks to slowly but surely push the enemy back. One of the most significant battles took place at the Imperial Citadel, where the NVA had established a strong defensive position. The U.S. Marines, supported by South Vietnamese forces, launched a series of attacks against the Citadel, using tanks, rockets, and small arms to try and dislodge the enemy. The fighting was intense, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. As the battle for Hue raged on, the city became a battleground, with buildings reduced to rubble and civilians caught in the crossfire. The NVA had prepared extensive defenses, including tunnels, bunkers, and sniper positions, which made it difficult for the Allied forces to make progress. However, the U.S. Marines and South Vietnamese forces persevered, using clever tactics such as clearing houses room by room and employing snipers to take out enemy fighters. The Tet Offensive, of which the Battle of Hue was a part, marked a turning point in the Vietnam War. The surprise attack on major cities across South Vietnam caught the U.S. and its allies off guard, leading to a re-evaluation of their strategy. Although the NVA ultimately failed to achieve their objectives, the battle highlighted the determination and resilience of the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong. The Battle of Hue was also marked by heroic actions on both sides. Despite being wounded, Ortiguero continued to lead his men, inspiring them to fight on despite overwhelming odds. As we explore the intensity and complexity of the Battle of Hue, it's essential to understand the strategic decisions that shaped the outcome. The U.S. military's decision to focus on retaking the city rather than pursuing a more mobile campaign against the NVA reflected their desire to demonstrate their commitment to defending South Vietnam. However, this approach also led to significant casualties and destruction as the battle became a grinding and bloody struggle. The human cost of the Battle of Hue was staggering, with estimates suggesting that over 5,000 civilians were killed or injured during the fighting. The city itself was left in ruins, with many of its historic buildings and landmarks destroyed or damaged. As the battle drew to a close, the U.S. and South Vietnamese forces had emerged victorious, but at great cost. As the battle drew to a close in March 1968, the U.S. and South Vietnamese forces had emerged victorious, but at great cost. The city of Hue lay in ruins, with many of its historic buildings and landmarks destroyed or damaged. The aftermath of the battle saw a significant shift in the balance of power, as the North Vietnamese Army's surprise attack on major cities across South Vietnam during the Tet Offensive had caught the U.S. and its allies off guard. Although the NVA ultimately failed to achieve their objectives, the battle highlighted the determination and resilience of the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong. As the U.S. military began to reassess its strategy in Vietnam, it became clear that the war was not winnable through conventional means. The Battle of Hue had demonstrated the futility of urban warfare, with both sides suffering heavy casualties and the city itself being reduced to rubble. The human cost of the battle was staggering, with estimates suggesting that over 5,000 civilians were killed or injured during the fighting. In the months and years that followed, the U.S. began to withdraw its forces from Vietnam, marking a significant turning point in the war. The Paris Peace Accords, signed in 1973, officially ended the U.S. involvement in the conflict, but the war would continue for another 2 years until the fall of Saigon in 1975. The legacy of the Battle of Hue continues to be felt today, with the city still bearing scars from the conflict. The Imperial Citadel, once a symbol of Vietnamese culture and history, was heavily damaged during the battle and has since been restored. However, many other historic buildings and landmarks were destroyed or damaged beyond repair. In recent years, there's been an effort to come to terms with the past and to reconcile the differences between the U.S. and Vietnam. In 2018, the U.S. and Vietnamese governments commemorated the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Hue with ceremonies and events held in both countries to honor the victims of the conflict. The battle highlighted the futility of urban warfare and the determination and resilience of the North Vietnamese Army and the Viet Cong. It also marked a significant shift in the balance of power, paving the way for the eventual withdrawal of American forces from Vietnam. That's all for today's War Bios. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, I'm General Biography reminding you to keep marching toward victory.